The point here is actually a much deeper one. Emily Thornberry's party, as we now know because of the astonishing revelations of Andrew Nether, a former New Labour worker, deliberately hoped to transform this country through mass immigration during its time in office, and has very largely succeeded in doing so, as people in many parts of this country know very well. The extent of the transformation by mass immigration is unprecedented in our national history. The Conservative Party pretends to be against this, but also knows deep down that unless particularly we leave the European Union, it has no power to act on this matter. So every so often, word goes out from our Prime Minister, Mr. Slippery, to his ministers, to say, will you come up with something which sounds conservative, because we're losing too many votes to UKIP. And so out comes Eric Pickles with his stuff about problem families, and out comes Theresa May with her guidelines about immigration. I promise you, none of these things will happen. There will be no difference. The mass immigration will continue at its unprecedented levels. The country will continue to be transformed. If you're in favour of that, then that's fine. What my problem is, nobody was ever asked about whether we wanted this. And by the time we discovered that it had happened, it was too late to do anything about it. And I really do think people should be a little bit more discontented about that than they are.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, what it means is that we're discussing something else. We're discussing a moral question. We're discussing a question of a society which increasingly is not willing to attribute personal responsibility to people, which makes excuses for almost everything people do, which is bad.
So
and once you do that, it makes it much easier for people to do those bad things.
Denise.
Because of the way in which it causes us to treat the people who take illegal drugs.
Yes.
Also, I have to say, the way in which we treat people who destroy their families and ruin their own lives by drinking too much.
Yes.
Instead of saying, in the case of the illegal drug takers, you're breaking the law, well, we will punish you for it, we indulge them and say that they are suffering from a disease. We rob them institutionally. We rob them of the idea that they're responsible for their own actions.
I agree with you, Peter.
The same thing happens with people who drink too much. If you start telling them this is a disease, you're not responsible for it, then they are relieved of responsibility.
Okay, yes. Use of the word Islamophobia. Yes. As if those of us who look at Islam and say we don't actually want this country to be an Islamic country and be governed by Islamic rules are in some cases in some way governed by an irrational fear. On the contrary, or a prejudice. On the contrary, it's a post-judice. We've looked at Islam. We don't like its precepts. We don't want them here. What I'm saying here is we do not want the precepts of Islam here because we do not want to live in an Islamic society. That is a rational position. It is not a phobia and can't be classified as some kind of mental illness. It is a perfectly reasonable position to take. And people who want to take part in a civilized discussion should not classify the opinions of their opponents as phobias. They should take them on with reason, fact and logic, especially academics and professionals.
Peter, thank you.
Oh, well, if you want to know why the Conservative Party is out of touch with the people who once were Conservatives and would like to vote for it, and the reason why the Conservative Party is dying on its feet and has almost no members, it's nothing to do with this. It's because the Conservative Party is in favour of the European Union. The Conservative Party is against punishing criminals. The Conservative Party is in favour of the failed comprehensive experiment in education. The Conservative Party is in favour of mass immigration. That's why the Conservative Party is out of touch. The issue of same-sex marriage is so immensely trivial and unimportant. It's only raised as a wind-up to draw poor, silly old Conservatives out of their caves so that they can be made to look like bigots and fools and howled at and jeered at as homophobes.
The supposedly left-wing parties, the Labour parties of the Anglosphere, have also been betraying their conservative-minded supporters. They have become factions of metropolitan bourgeois bohemians who couldn't care less about the conditions of the poor and who are merely concerned with the luxury lives they live in their capital cities. And so there is a complete divorce between what many people want out of life and what their politicians decide. In terms of the British Conservative Party, if you really want to know, I mean, the best thing that could possibly happen to it would be that it split and collapsed, and I do all that I can to hurry this on, because nothing could be nothing could be worse than it. I could carve a better political party out of a banana than the British Conservative Party without any difficulty indeed. But the problem is that in our system, and I think in yours as well, people vote tribally. And as long as these parties continue to exist at elections, enough people will vote tribally to keep them alive.